Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another series review. Today's series review is none other than The Mandalorian. So, what is The Mandalorian TV series about? Well, it's about, pretty much what's in the title. The Mandalorian is a hunter, a bounty hunter to be specific. And he has been hired in the beginning of this series to carry out a very prominent mission. A mission to capture a certain individual. An individual who seems to have been lost and abandoned in an old facility on a planet. Now, what he doesn't know about this individual is that they are one of the survivors of the Jedi Purge. He considers Grogu in the beginning of this series to be none other than a kind of vulnerable child who the Empire wants to take advantage of. And this is the first time in Mando's history that he decides to go against his bounty. Mando is quite a persistent bounty hunter, especially for a Mandalorian. He has spent most of his time bringing in checks and taking home the money, and just living it up. But now that he finds Grogu, he finally finds himself having a purpose beyond that. When he begins to discuss with his informant about why the Empire wants the child so much, he's told he can't talk about it, and most importantly, that he doesn't really know the full extent to why. Across the 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, we find him meeting various different people from the Star Wars canon. One being Bo-Katan, one of the Mandalorians, who was introduced in the Clone Wars. Another is Ahsoka Tano, who was introduced in the Clone Wars. Now, what is so important about these two individuals, you may be asking? Well, Bo-Katan is one of the daughters of the House of Mandalore. She is the only rightful heir left in the Mandalorian creed. And Ahsoka Tano is the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. Mando also finds himself crossing paths with Luke Skywalker, the son of Anakin Skywalker. He also finds himself crossing paths with one of the pilots from the Rebellion, and a bunch of other Mandalorians. Bo-Katan and Mando have a big argument at one point about the Mandalorian creed. This is due to the fact that Mando comes from a kind of cult that lives off of the Mandalorian reputation. Now, they're not a full cult, and they do sway a little bit from the Mandalorian beliefs. But due to their beliefs, it makes Mando in a position in which he feels like any time he takes off his helmet, he is dishonoring the creed. Mando, of course, pays the price for this by losing parts of his armor pieces of the series. He also comes across a technician who used to go out with a bunch of Jawas. However, Mando's biggest adversary throughout the whole series is Moff Gideon. Now, who is Moff Gideon, you may be asking? He is an individual who works partly for Thrawn. Moff Gideon is one of the survivors of the Empire, and he hopes to bring it to rise from the ashes. Mando has to bring together everyone in this series that he knows in hopes of taking down Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon even tries to kill a lot of the Mandalorians. Why? Because he knows that the Mandalorians are the only thing standing between him and his glorious empire. Moff Gideon also points out that he took the child because of the Mandalorians inside of it. Now, what are Mandalorians, you may be asking, and I do apologize if I'm butchering that name, but they are essentially what allows the Jedi to move things with their minds, and also allows them to harness and connect with everything in their world. Now, by the end of the series, after a long and strenuous fight, Mando manages to finally sit down and retire with Grogu. However, it wasn't always as easy, as Grogu and Mando find themselves at a cross path when we find out Grogu's backstory. It turns out that during Order 66, Kelleran Beck saved Grogu from the oncoming 501st Legion. The pair of them flee the planet, and Keller and Beck's story is left ambiguous. It's not quite clear where him or the rest of the Jedi who did manage to get out of the temple went, or whether any of them actually survived. But it's very clear that at some point him and Grogu's past faded away. Grogu has still a connection to the Force, as Ahsoka points out, and is offered the opportunity to go and be a part of Luke Skywalker's new school for the Jedi. However, Luke gives him the option between being a Mandalorian and being a Jedi, and Grogu decides he wants to be a Mandalorian. Respecting his wishes, Luke sends him back to the Mandalorian, letting them have their time together. However, Ahsoka calls Luke stubborn and says he's a little bit like his father in that way. After all, Anakin never really wanted to train Snips in the first place, but when he did begin to train her, he did realise the opportunity that he was missing if he hadn't. So, The Mandalorian Series 1 to 3. What do I give this series out of 10? It's a solid series with a bunch of different story arcs, and most importantly, it all ties really well together. The thing I love the most is how The Mandalorian takes a lot of pieces of canon and embraces them, gives you new lanes, new sections to go down, new avenues to venture through. And for that reason, I give it a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next series review. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, you beautiful people.